Okay, last time we started discussing relationships because that's really the crux of databases. In fact, databases are typically called relational databases. And that's what's significant about them, because not only is the data stored, but relationships between the data is stored. You can have connections between different things. And we mentioned that there's three kinds, one of which we're going to kind of ignore, the one-to-one relationship. But the other two, one-to-many relationship and many-to-many relationship, we're going to look into. All right. Now, we don't deal directly with the database. All right. It's always good to look at the database that gets generated, but don't make any edits to it. Your edit should go through the model. But you can see how it implemented that table-wise if you're interested. Now, the part that we were looking at last time was the relationship between department and course. Bring those two things up. There's department and there is course. And there's a one-to-many relationship. Again, to get the one-to-many relationship, you got to look in both directions. One course has one department. A department can have many courses. So that's conventionally how you would have looked at it in database design. And it's the same thing here too, but I might use different words to describe it. So I know there's a relationship between courses and departments, right? Courses are grouped together by department. The CIS courses are CIS, the accounting courses are accounting courses, and so on. So I know that there's some relationship between course and department. The question you need to ask yourself is, does one of these, and I'm looking at course to start out, does one of these have a single department, or does it have a list of departments? So that's the question we're going to ask ourselves in all these examples. Is there one other thing that it's related to, or is there a list of things? So course, there is one department associated with course. So because there's one department associated with course, we have a department ID. That's the primary key of the department entity, and a department object. So when the answer to the question, is there one of these or a list of these? Is there a one of these? This is what you do. You have the ID, or the primary key of the thing that there's one of, and you have one of those types of objects. So you have a department object. Now you ask the opposite, going in the other direction. That's why it's complaining. I accidentally erased that. Now, department. Does a department have one course, or does it have a list of courses? Well, a list of courses. The department has a list of courses. Therefore, we're going to have a collection of courses. All right. So that's how we get the one-to-many relationship. We look and say, a course, one department or a list of departments. One department, so we do this. Department, one course or a list of course. It's a list of courses, and we have this. So let's run this and let's take a look at, I think we left off just about ready to look at the drop down. So let's run this and let's get to where the drop down is. We'll take a look. Okay, so we look at courses. You saw how the course has one department. So that's why we display as the one department. Now, when we go to insert or edit a course, notice we have a drop down where we can pick which department. We're only storing one of them, but the drop down gives us a list of all the departments, and we get to select what department we want. And we can add it. All right, just to revisit, let's look at the code here on the list of courses. So on the list of courses, which is the index for courses, we're going to look at two pieces of it. Remember, there's always two files with a razor page, and usually both of them have a role when we're relating data together. I'm going to start with the code behind the .cs file. The .cs file has in it, we may have seen things that look like this before, but it has an additional thing, include. For each course, include the courses department. What that does is that tells it to, when you retrieve the course, to populate these fields. Populate the department, well, specifically populate the department object. Now, for efficiency, it doesn't automatically populate it. You might just want a list of courses that have 3 credit hours and you don't care about the department. All right, in which case, that's extra overhead if you retrieve the department information as well. So you have to explicitly say, hey, this is a list of courses, but I also want the department information. And that's how we do it with the include department, like that. So that's the role that the code behind the .cs file performs. The role that the one side of it does, or the list part of it, the razor page, is seen here. Because of that, we can pull up for the item. What is an item? Is each course in model.course. So we retrieved that list of courses that's in the model, and it's called courses. We want for each one of them in turn, we want the ID, we want the title, we want the credit hours, and we want for the course, remember course, what this item is a course because we're asking for each course in models.courses. That's what an item is a course. We say, give me for that course, for its department, the name. So it'll go to the department object that got retrieved when we retrieve the course, that related data, and we'll display the name from that object. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to look at, is there any questions on that before I proceed? Next thing I want to do then is look at the drop down. And that, if I'm not mistaken, is in, well, it's in the create and it is in the edit, I believe. So let's look at the create. Again, both of these files have a role in making the dropdown work. And you can sort of figure out like the roles in general that each of these two appear. The .cs file, what I've been calling the code behind, is responsible for the data retrieval. So it's going to make sure we retrieve the right data. The Razor page, the .cs_html file, is going to be responsible for displaying that data. So we have the retrieval and the displaying, two separate things. And in programming terms, that's a good thing. When we can separate things in their components, that's generally speaking a very good thing. Now, you might notice something a little bit different in this one. Let's look at department create. Notice that the department create, the class is called create model, and it inherits from page model. That's what this means. All right. In our case, the case that we're looking at, create model, which is, this is a create model for courses, inherits from department name page model. So what does it mean from to inherit from another class? Well, that means that you get all of the attributes and methods on that class without having to redefine it. So here's what they did. Because both the create and the edit both need a dropdown, both the edit model and create model inherit from this department name page model. That did is that saved us from having duplicate code. Duplicate code is sort of a sign that you could be doing something better. You have virtually the identical code in the same place, maybe you could do something better. Not always, but maybe. And in this case, retrieving the dropdown is something that we do in a couple of places. So therefore, we created a class that's going to contain just that little piece of functionality. And then these two page models inherit not from the generic page model, but inherit from the department name page model that we created. Any of you have done inheritance before in other classes? Same idea here. I mean, it works the same. The idea is like this. When you inherit from a class, you're specifying a more specific kind of that class. Like, for example, we had a class for dogs. German Shepherd would be inherited from dog, because a German Shepherd can do everything that a dog can do, plus it has maybe some additional features that are unique to just German Shepherds. Saint Bernard would inherit from dog. That way, all the dog functions that we have, we only have to write once in the dog class, and these other classes get those functions for free. Same thing here. We'll look at our page model. This one inherits from page model. So our create model and that's not the right one. Our create model and our edit model inherit from department name page model, and that inherits from page model. So our create model gets everything in department page model, as well as everything that's just in the regular generic page model. There are some classes that are built in the ASP.NET framework that you don't have to define. They've already taken all the behaviors that a page does and put it in its own class. So this has one function. And that function is to populate a dropdown. So in both the create and the edit, when the page initially loads, we populate the dropdown. We pass it department ID and hold that thought. We'll come back to that in a minute. So what this allows us to do is this allows us to have the one that was already selected highlighted in the drop-down list. Let me show you what I mean. There's a difference between edit and insert. If I select this course, I didn't want details, I wanted edit. You select this course, the dropdown is already set to economics. If we go into insert, the dropdown is set to this sort of null value to tell you to select department. Likewise, if we look at this one, edit it, the dropdown's already set to mathematics. So by passing the department ID for the course, we enable that functionality to happen. The create model does it as well. But it doesn't pass that second argument. It only passes the context being the database context, and it doesn't pass over the ID. Why? Well, because we're creating course. We don't have any course ID yet. So what does this, so both of these call this function. Now, this function, if you notice, has two arguments. It has a database context, and it has department ID, but they call it selected department, which is an object. We initialize that object. Well, we don't initialize the object to null if that argument is omitted when this function is called. So notice on the create model, we don't give it that argument, whereas on the edit, we do. So if we don't populate that argument, then a null value is placed in the selected department. So we form our database query. We want to pull from D in departments. We want to order it by D name, and we want to select department. We're then creating a select list. A select list is sort of the data behind a dropdown. When we think of a select list, and this works for dropdowns as well as dropdowns, radio buttons, other things, we think of it having two things. We have the key that's used in the database side, and we have the description that is used on the user side. So we want the dropdown to show the key because that's what the database needs to put in that department ID. Yet users aren't going to recognize things by their key. Therefore, we want to display the name. So we get back from this a query. We form a select list of that query. We want the department name and the department ID and the name, and we're giving it the selected department. So the select list function takes a query. What we want for the value of the dropdown, what we want the description of the dropdown to be, and which one was selected. So in both cases, when we're done, this department name SL, which is defined here, is populated in both the create model for department. I'm sorry, the create model for courses and the edit model for courses. I might say, how is that populated? I don't see it as part of the create model. Remember, it inherits from that, and therefore it gets all the attributes and functions that are defined inside of that. So then let's look at the .cs.html. And B. I think I want that one. This one. Yeah, of course. We say select blah, blah, blah. Where are we putting the data? We're putting the data in the course department ID. Where are we getting the items for this dropdown? We're getting it from the model department name SL. Now, when you do this in your assignments, and I don't remember what assignment you're required to do this on, you don't have to create a page to inherit from. I'll let you duplicate the code on both pages. But you need to create a select list in your code behind file and a function that's going to populate it. And then you'll use it this way where on the dropdown that you're using to create and using to edit. Notice this is slightly different. This has that default option at the beginning that says select department, so the null option. We don't get that with the edit. We don't get that extra option, the edit, because the course has to have a department. We set that dummy option or default option or null option, whatever you want to call it, to be select department because we don't want people forgetting to enter a department and just accepting the top item on the drop-down list. Any questions on this? Next thing we're going to look at is an example of a many-to-many relationship. A many-to-many relationship is where you have one of these has many of these, one of these has many of those. So an example would be between students and courses. One student can take many courses. One course can contain many students. So that's one example of a many-to-many relationship. We're going to start out with sort of a simpler example, and that is between courses and instructors. Because one course could have many instructors. You know, look at CISS243. A lot of different people teach that course. But one instructor can teach many courses. So there's a many-to-many relationship between courses and instructors. So let's look at the courses model again and look at the instructor model. Now remember, we're going to ask that question. Do I got one? Do I got a list? So we're going to start out with the instructor. Do I got one course? Do I have a list of courses? I have a list of courses. Therefore, at the very bottom, we have a collection course indicating a list of courses. From the course, the same thing is answered. For a course, do we have one instructor or a list of instructors? We have a list of instructors. Therefore, we have that. Now, this will actually create in the database what's called an intersecting entity, an extra table that matches up all the courses and instructors. We don't really have a model for that because we're not really interested in that. We either want to look at all the courses an instructor teaches or all the instructors that teach a certain course. So we don't have a model for that intersecting entity. But if we look at the database, school context, look at the list of tables. One of the tables is course instructor. So any of you that have taken CISS243, it's not like we're doing anything different database-wise. It's that we're not interested in the database detail, we're interested in the model detail. So there's no reason for us to access that directly. We either want to know all the courses for an instructor or all the instructors for a course. But sure enough, that's there. What can we do with that? Well, under courses, see anything. Instructors, yeah. Under instructors, at the instructor list, we have a list of courses that they teach. We could have done that on the course side, but they didn't in this example. That might be a good exercise if you want to practice. Make the course list include the list of instructors that teach a particular course. So let's look at the instructor list. I had already had that open. Again, CS, HTML, and CS file come into play. They each have their own job. The CS file is responsible for pulling the data. Now let's think about this for a second. How do you think the query is going to look so that we pull not just the instructor, but we pull the courses for that instructor? If you answered, it will have include in there, you're correct. Because they also have office assignment, which is, I think, a one-to-many relationship. We're ignoring that one for now. But we're including courses. What that's saying is when we pull the instructors, we want to populate that course list inside the instructor object. Now there's a then include, all right? Then include is different than an include. Then include is we want to pull the department not associated with the professor, but associated with the course. So you use the then include when you're not pulling something from the main source of the query, but from the previous include. So as you can see, we filled in this instructor list. They created an instructor's data file just to reuse a little bit of code. So there's one extra step here. And the instructor, we're populating that instructor's list in instructor data with the instructor information as well as the office assignment information, the courses information, and the department. And we're ordering it by last name. That's the data retrieval part. As far as the display part, we're going to have a nested loop because we're going to loop through for each instructor in this instructor list. And that instructor list is in another object called instructor data. We're going to loop through all the instructors, and then we're going to loop through each of their courses. So we have a nested loop, displaying all the instructors. For each instructor, we're displaying the list of courses. Now, this actually has some kind of cool functionality in it. One of the reasons why they created that separate instructor index data. You wouldn't have to do that. You could have brought all those into the instructor index. Then maybe a little simpler. But the instructor query allows us to do this. I can pick a professor, hit select. It'll show me all the list of all the courses and their departments. Remember, we retrieved department 2. I can click select and get a list of all the students that are enrolled in that class. We'll cover this part of it in subsequent lectures. I just wanted to cover this part of it where we get the list of courses associated with it. So as always, 2 parts. CS file populates that list in the instructor object, in the instructor list. The instructor objects in that instructor list. It populates it with the course information, a list of courses. Then the HTML file displays all the loops through. So it loops through all the courses. For each course, it loops through for each instructor, it loops through for each course. So it loops through all the instructors. For each instructor, it loops through each course. Now, the relationship between student and courses is similar, right? If you think about it, one student can take many courses, one course can have many students. But this is implemented a little bit differently because we are interested in some extra data besides that relationship. We are interested in the grade. So we have our enrollment ID, course ID, student ID, course and student, and we have another attribute, the grade. This in database terms is like the other one was an intersecting entity. The only difference in this, and the reason why we bother creating the model for this, is we could be interested in pulling that grade information. I don't know if they do in this example or not. I don't think they do, but we could be interested in that. So for each enrollment record, we have one course and one student. So we see the ID and the object. These enrollment records, though, each course, we have a list of enrollment records. And for each student, we have a list of enrollment records. So two slightly different flavors of many-to-many. One is where the only thing we're interested in capturing is the relationship. The other is where, in addition to the relationship, we want to capture something else, like a grade. We could have taken the same approach with instructors, for example, if we wanted the section of the course in there too. So I don't know, I'd have to sit down and think about that one, but that could be additional information we would want about the instructor course relationship. Let's see if this information is used anywhere. I know it's used on that instructor homepage. There you go, on the student details. Well, they do use a grade here, my mistake. So let's look at the student details and see how to do that. As usual, there's going to be side of it, part of it done in the CS file, part of it done in the CSS_HTML file. CS responsible for retrieving the data. CSS_HTML is responsible for displaying the data. So as we look here, in the CS file, this gets passed on the query string an ID. If the ID isn't there, then we can't display the information about the student if there is no student. But again, notice what we have. We're pulling up the student, but we want to include the student's enrollment records. And for each enrollment record, we want to include the course information. So for students, we want to fill in those enrollments. For each enrollment record, we want to fill in the course information. Remember, each enrollment record has student and course information. So include, and then include is used when we have relationships. Okay, over here, we display student last name, middle initial. Why can we do that? We can do that because we know we're only retrieving a single student. Student isn't getting, this student is not a list of students, it's a single student. Why? Because we're pulling up the detail of a single student. Notice we don't say to list at the end. We say, give me the first or default. Where the ID matches the ID that came from the query string. So we don't have to loop through the students because there's only one student. We do, however, have to loop through the enrollment records, and that's what we do here. So for each enrollment record that that student has, we loop through, we display the course title, and we do, from the enrollment, we display the courses, associated courses title, and we display the grade for that. I know it's a lot of information. My suggestion is to review this, maybe watch the lecture again, review it, and see if it starts making sense, and then see to try things. For example, department. All right, department doesn't show a list of courses that belong to it. See if you can take and add that. That would be a great exercise. See if you can add to the department details a list of all the courses for that department. Some of the relationships we didn't look at, like there's a relationship between instructor and department as far as the administrator goes. There's an office entity. And so on. See if you can display on the courses detail page a list of students. These are all things that you can practice, and you have a good model there. You know, you've seen how you did it in one case, take it and run with it and see if you can adapt that code to another place. Are there any questions? All right, this seems to be getting to be very repetitive, but I will be out next week for cataract surgery. I die, so good luck. I should see you in about 2 weeks. Thank you. Thanks, Tricia, for the good wishes.